Thank you for the conference and invitation. I shall try to be brief, and as I come from a discipline of international relations, mine has a more kind of orientation towards political philosophy and how I believe a mystic approach to question of war and peace can be beneficial to human community. To begin with, conventional paradigms in international relations, they do not adequately address concerns and needs of the contemporary era, in the sense that they are all systemic approaches, and even so, quite ineffective. The state, as the cornerstone of international relations, cannot deal with environmental degradation, the question of terrorism. It needs to come together and have a collectivity of states. But again, states does not want to give up power because it's the ultimate, as realists would have us believe, actor in international life. There's an overemphasis on the structures whilst the individual is left to her own devices. We do not see world politics in terms of individuals. We see it in terms of structures, whether a democratic country, dictatorial country, or in terms of people of a country. But the individual as the agent, the most fundamental agent of change, is overlooked. Islamic mysticism, but I've also found that to be the case, particularly in Christianity, Orthodox mysticism, and even before that, some Catholic mysticism. However, without claiming any social or political doctrine, concentrates on the individual. Molavi, otherwise known as Rumi, the 13th century poet, mystic, is particularly noted in my presentation in this regard. What I'm saying is that, in short, alongside the systems, we must have citizens willing to abide by the rules of the system. Classical theories do not adequately address this. The liberal peace project says if you have a liberal structure, you can have peace everywhere. Or the neo-realism in international relations believes that the international system and international structure is ultimately responsible for determining the outcome of political developments at global level. So it's all systemic approaches that exist. Systemic approaches are now, like realism, liberalism, Marxism, and others, they describe and prescribe by means of structural analysis. They have a unit analysis, of course. Realism says anything that happens in the world must be done through the states, by the states, and without the states, nothing can happen, really. Liberalism uses people as a unit of analysis. That is people that we should take into account is the wishes of the people, particularly in democracies, that eventually comes out. And if we allowed people to determine their future, we would not have war, we would only have peace. Marxism uses class as a unit of analysis, that the conflict of classes, the proletariat, capitalist, this civilizational discourse that Huntington brought, propounded, uses civilizations as a unit of analysis. But all these units of analysis, they overlook at the most fundamental level the role of the individual. Whereas we now know that whatever system comes about, individual has the ability to circumvent the dictates of the system or requirements of the system. We saw how in 2008, or we've seen many times before that, individuals were cheated the system and enriched themselves, and then economy came to to a crisis. Of course, you may say this is the boom and bust that is inherent in capitalism, but without wanting to say too much about that, because it's not directly related to what I say, we say that the individually or individualism that is inherent in liberalism, that is tied to capitalism, teaches and asks the individual to do whatever he or she can for his her own benefit. The killer instinct or the shark or such terms that we hear in, particularly in financial journals and analysis. So this individualistic look at the individual by liberalism, tied with capitalism, reinforces this cycle of boom and bust, because every individual thinks of the individual benefit, even at a cost to the collective benefit. And no system is foolproof, as we know, we have seen, whether in terms of political structure or economic structure. Still crises can come about, still war takes place. A lot of the liberal countries that have liberal structures at home and practice liberal policies domestically have a very realist and non-liberal foreign policy. So in a way, the liberal structure at home does not necessarily produce a liberal foreign policy, because again, individuals who make foreign policy, who are pro liberal policy at home, support a realist foreign policy that is for the benefit of their own country, even at a cost to other countries. So all this is to say that systemic approach has got loopholes, huge holes, and has proven inadequate per se to address and resolve human issues in our era. We need something else, at least, if structure is a necessary condition for advancement and prosperity in human life, human community. It is not sufficient. It may be necessary, but it is not sufficient. State-centric systems, they believe that rationality is the most prominent feature, that your states are rational. And here I have to speed up because this can take a while, because reason and rationality are used interchangeably together in IR literature, international relations literature, and they are not the same. And this is sad that rationality is christened in the name of reason. States are rational actors, but that does not mean they are reasonable actors. Now there is a question of Thomas Hobbes, The Soul of Law, and his political philosophy that basically says rationality is to satisfy our desires and avoid our fears and aversions. So rationality is not authentic. The only authentic thing we have is our desires and fears. So we use rationality to fulfill desires and avoid what we don't like. So rationality is a tool in our hands, is not authentic in itself. And this is very different from what we may call reason. Here I bring a quote from Rumi: "Wondrous and wondering is love, nay rationale, goes only after self-interest, a so banal." Rationality is that which seeks profit. And if it does not give some sort of benefit, then it is deemed to be irrational. The antithesis to rationality can be love, because somebody who acts out of love does not act for any self-benefit or self-enhancement. It's just for the question of love or the benefit of the beloved. And by using these two in contradistinction to one another, we can see how being rational can be quite devastating to the discourse of human life and humanity. Hikmat, which is the word I've used, taken from Rumi for wisdom, holistic wisdom and reason, allows, however, for the inclusion of love. And unlike rationality, that just as it states as rational actors, they operate only out of self-interest, national interest, and not out of liking other countries. Now, that is rationality, but if you have reason, as is propounded, as is stated by Rumi in the essence of creation, the hikmat, reason of God in destiny and in decree, made us lovers of one another, joined and free. Because of that foreordainment, all particles of the world are paired as mates in love in one fold. So reason and love can go together in this discourse. But in the realist, in the systemic approach that we have in realism, rationality, of course, is supreme, and that does not go with love. Here I'm asking for a paradigmatic shift, how we look at things. We shouldn't try to find different answers for the questions that we've had. We've got to change the question itself. We've got to ask different questions. Niebuhr was a Christian, a committed Christian who believed that the original sin was responsible, and then we made ourselves tainted, and we succumbed to temptation. Here I am just again another Sufi Hafiz, 700 years ago. He says, beware that if you heed the temptation of the self prime, as Adam, you will be out of paradise in no time. In the sense that if you succumb to your temptation and desires, as Hobbes have us believe, then we'll come out of that heavenly condition of life that we were meant to live in, and we will be condemned to continue our life in this state of conflict that exists. In fact, there is a verse in the Quran that says to Adam and Eve after being expelled, that you go on earth where conflict shall reign between you for a while. Now, Hobbesian individual, Hobbesian individual not in control, but controlled by greed, as stated by Plato, and devoid of love and selflessness. This is the individual that Thomas Hobbes, the English philosopher, portrays for us. This individual wants to fulfill desire, is afraid of, worst of all, painful, torturous death, but other fears, is completely selfish, has no love, and that's very rational. And if that particular individual that Thomas believed is the quintessential human being, Homo sapiens sapien, if that individual is given the power to orchestrate, to build up a world, it will create something we now call the sovereign state, which is very egotistic, which is only interested in its own national interests. And that, naturally, that state, which is very selfish and has been created by the selfish man, then that will in turn bring about and establish an international system that will reinforce and reify and support the selfishness of the state and the individual. As the Sufis believe, I think there's a poem in Persian, wheat grows from wheat, barley from barley. You cannot plant wheat and then expect to have barley, and vice versa. Rumi says, if reason joins forces with reason seeking delight, reason, not rationality here, not the desire that Thomas Hobbes says, this is reason, this is more like Plato. If reason joins forces with reason seeking delight, light shall prevail and the path will be bright. Should desire couple with desire and trade, Hobbesian, darkness will descend and the path shall fade. A mystic approach is an all in-out, bottoms-up approach that does not seek peace externally. Peace starts within you. UNESCO Charter says that peace starts in the minds of men, and therefore it is in the minds of men that the construction of peace must begin. So how can you have peace within yourself? And Rumi says, contemplate the same grievous war in thyself. Why then art thou engaged in warring with others? You have jealousy, you have hatred, you have enmity, you have greed, you have frustration. You have all these negative forces within you. We do. And yet we want to go and establish peace outside. But wheat grows from wheat, barley from barley. If you're full of conflict and hatred and dishonesty, you are naturally going to radiate the same, establish the same outside. Selfish individual builds a selfish states, as I said before, and selfish states builds a selfish international structure. A question of justice and order, very quickly, that in the order, a mystic order, when we want peace, we do not put order above justice as it is done by the so-called English school or international society school, or some of the realists, because, or even liberals, because they say we cannot achieve justice in chaos. So it's bad order is better than disorder or no order. That's a fallacy, because if you have an unjust order, the only way you can achieve justice is to dismantle the wrong and bad order, and in place reconstruct a proper and just order. So the question of the priority of order over justice is fallacious here. The art of separating the unjust from the just, he or she will acquire, who beheads the inner tyrannical desire. You see, again, desire. If you go for desire and just say your selfish rationality is for my fulfilling desires, avoiding fear, there is no love, there is no selflessness, that desire will disable you from distinguishing just from unjust. You will be able to determine what is just and what is unjust. That is when you can control and you can behead your internal foe, the desire to take more and more and give less and less. This is, I think, the last slide. An out and top-down approach to IR, which is externally we send troops, we increase, I don't know, security, surveillance. This top-down approach, structure dominating agent. Here we have to, again, we are disempowering the individual. Everything in our international life is organized by states, some of which may be democratic internally, but not a democratic international. I mean, easily go to the United Nations, see the Security Council, and see how 5 permanent members, for instance, have a right permanent seat and have the right of vetoing everything. We don't have a democratic international life. I mean, that's a given. We have disempowered the individual, and we have put a system that supports the selfish state, is the ethos of our political life. And that statehood is based on and reinforces selfishness at the lowest but most fundamental level, the level of the individual. Therefore, in parallel to systems, we must also focus on the individual and promote a degree of self-sacrifice for the collective good, and not encourage extreme individualism that disregards other members of the society. Again, that poem, I say, contemplate the same grievous war in thyself. why then art thou engaged in warring with others? Power is by nature liberating. The more powerful we are, the more free we are. The love of power, however, should be replaced with the power of love. Hafez, again, the mystic poet, I say it openly and do so with happy laughter, that I am the slave of love and thus free of here and hereafter. Rumi has, if I remember, I thought I had included it, it seems I haven't, a poem that people's wars, their war and peace is just out of out of caprice and out of a whim. It's all wooden and completely lacking substance. So it's all what we make up in our mind and the conception and the constructions that we have that reinforced by all these negative forces that lead us towards war. I stop there and I thank you for your attention.